So this event is all about how the Victorians celebrated Christmas and the things that they started doing at Christmas time that we still do today. But some of the things that the Victorians did to celebrate Christmas, they're actually much older traditions from Germany. And one of those traditions is the Christmas tree. And so the story of the Christmas tree and how we decorate the Christmas tree, how the Victorians decorated the Christmas tree, it starts in a pine forest, just like this in the wintertime, in December, close to Christmas, but 500 years ago, far across the ocean in Germany. And around that time, German people, they already decorated their houses with evergreen trees that they harvested from the forest. If they weren't able to get a real tree, they would build little pyramids out of wood and decorate them with pine branches. But this particular story I'm going to tell you is about the man who is said to have invented Christmas tree lights, which is a big part of how we decorate our Christmas trees today. And that man was Martin Luther. And Martin Luther was a German preacher. We probably better remember him for starting the Protestant Reformation. But he is also said to have been the first person to decorate his Christmas tree with lights. And so the story of how Martin Luther invented the Christmas tree light begins in a forest just like this, in the wintertime, 500 years ago in the early 1500s. And the story goes that one night, Martin Luther was out strolling through the forest while his family slept. And the forest was peaceful and still. The ground was covered in snow. And he was surrounded by these tall pine trees. And it was a beautiful, clear night. And so he was enjoying the stillness of the forest. He was kind of meditating, walking through the snow, and composing in his head a sermon that he was planning to deliver in church that Sunday. And at one moment, he happened to stop, and he looked up into the branches of the trees above him, and it was a beautiful, clear night. And you might know that, hopefully you've all been fortunate enough to be away from the city where there's no light pollution. You can look up in the night sky and you see millions of stars. And that's exactly what Martin Luther saw when he looked up through the branches of the trees. He saw a beautiful, clear sky and millions of stars. And those stars looked like they were shining through the branches of the trees. And he was really struck by how beautiful a sight that was. And the thought that occurred to him was, boy, I wish my family could be here to see this as well. And then he had an idea. So he went home, he went to bed, and the next day he headed back out into the forest with an axe. And he found a pine tree that was just the right size to fit in the parlor of his house. And he cut the tree down and he dragged it into his house and set it up in a corner of the parlor. And then he went rummaging through some of the drawers and he found some little candles. And back in the 1500s, candles were really important for seeing things at night. So he found some little ones. And he found some bits of wire. And he started wiring those candles to the branches of the Christmas tree. And then he gathered his family around and he lit every one of the candles on all the branches of the tree. And he gathered them around and showed them. And, they were struck by how beautiful a sight that was. And it reminded Martin Luther exactly of that scene that he had seen when he was walking through the forest the night before. Of seeing the lights of all those little stars shining through the branches of the trees. And so it wasn't long before Martin Luther's idea kind of caught on with his neighbors, And eventually, over the years, it spread across Germany, and it became another tradition that the Germans used to celebrate Christmas and to decorate their houses for Christmas. And eventually, 300 years later or so, that tradition traveled to Britain. It was during the time of Queen Victoria, and that idea, that German idea of the Christmas lights, traveled to Britain with Victoria's new husband, Prince Albert. And Prince Albert was German. He'd grown up in Germany. He had grown up celebrating every Christmas with the Christmas tree. And around, after he moved to England, after he got married, he moved to England to be with Queen Victoria. That first Christmas, living in England, he noticed how differently people in England celebrated Christmas from how people celebrated in Germany. And, he was getting homesick. He missed the traditions that he was used to having around Christmas time back home. And so, he spoke to Queen Victoria about it, and they decided to start to do some of those traditions at their new home together in England with their family. So that first Christmas in England, Prince Albert's first Christmas, they set up a Christmas tree in the parlor, and they decorated it, and they gathered the whole family around to help decorate the tree. And there just happened to be a journalist from a major London newspaper, and they didn't have, he didn't have a camera. They were pretty hard to come by, cameras in those days. So he made a sketch of the family decorating the Christmas tree, gathered around the Christmas tree in the parlor. And that image was published in that newspaper, and it was republished in other newspapers all over England. And it wasn't long before pretty much everybody in England was seeing this image of a Christmas tree. And this is a really new idea to people in England. But it wasn't long before that idea caught on with, the common people all across Britain. So it became a tradition that Victorian people in Britain observed or celebrated at Christmas. And because Britain was such a world power in those days, that tradition traveled around the world, including right here in Canada. So it wasn't long before a Christmas tree in every home with beautiful decorations and lights became a part of how Victorians celebrated Christmas and how we celebrate Christmas today.